Imagine a small piece of flesh kept in a church for more than 1,000 years. In 1970, a team of doctors was finally allowed to take it into a laboratory and examine it. They expected to find old, dried-out matter, perhaps a forgery. What they found instead, they could not explain. It was real human flesh, and it was, somehow, the tissue of a living heart. Tonight's story is about how that flesh came to be there, in a small Italian town, 1,200 years ago. You're listening to The Pilgrim's Lantern, true stories from the history of the Catholic faith, told slowly for the hours before sleep. So make yourself comfortable, turn out the light, and let's go back, much further than 1970, to a stone monastery in Italy in the 8th century. The town is called Lanciano, and around the year 700 there was a monk there, a priest whose name history did not keep. He was, by every account, a learned man, intelligent, careful, and he had a problem he could not solve. He no longer believed. He could not believe the central claim of the Mass. He said every single day that the bread and the wine truly become the body and blood of Christ. He studied, he prayed, he tried to force the doubt away. It would not leave him. One morning, standing at the altar in the middle of words he had spoken 10,000 times, the doubt was louder than it had ever been. He lifted the bread, and he spoke the words of consecration, and the bread changed in his hands. It was no longer bread, it had become a circle of living flesh, and in the cup, the wine had become blood, real blood, which separated as he watched into 5 small clots of different sizes. The monk stood frozen, trembling, holding flesh that had been bread a moment before. The people came forward, they saw it too. Word spread through the town and then far beyond it. Here is the first thing that science cannot easily explain. That flesh and those 5 clots of blood were never embalmed. They were never treated with any preservative. They were simply placed in a container and kept. Bread left out turns to mold in days. Flesh and blood, left in open air for centuries, should have crumbled to dust long ago. This did not. For more than 1,200 years, through wars, through moves from one church to another, the flesh of Lanciano remained. The church examined it many times across the centuries, but it was not until our own age that someone could finally look inside it. In 1970, the church gave permission for a full scientific study. They chose Dr. Eduardo Linoli, a respected professor of anatomy, histology, and pathology, and the work was later cross-checked by the World Health Organization. He was not asked to prove a miracle. He was asked to do the opposite, to test, to measure, and to explain it away. He took samples. He placed the 1,000-year-old flesh and blood under his microscopes, and the results came back. The flesh was real human tissue, and not just any tissue. It was heart muscle, myocardium, the wall of a living human heart. The blood was real human blood, and the flesh and the blood were the same blood type, type AB. There was no trace of any preservative of any chemical anywhere in the sample, and the blood still held the proteins and minerals of fresh blood, as though it had been shed that very day and not 12 centuries before. Dr. Linoli's conclusion was cautious, and it was staggering. By every test available to modern science, this was the flesh and the blood of a human being, and he could not explain how it had survived, nor how bread and wine could ever have become it. You can still go to Lanciano today. The flesh and the blood are kept above the altar inside a monstrance where anyone can come and stand before them. A doubting priest 1,200 years ago asked for proof and was given something that the most advanced laboratories of our time still cannot explain away. Here is the part that stays with me. The man at the center of this story was not a sinner running from God. He was a believer, a priest, who simply could not make his mind agree with his faith. And the answer he was given was not an argument. It was not a cleverer book. It was, look. Look with your own eyes. And maybe that is the quiet question this story leaves on your pillow tonight. Not, is there enough evidence to believe? But, what would I do if the very thing I doubted turned out to be real, right there in my hands? If tonight's story meant something to you, I hope you'll come back. Subscribe to the Pilgrim's Lantern. A new story arrives every week, told slowly for the hours before sleep. And if you leave a comment below, tell me one thing you have always found hard to believe. I read every one. Good night.